in the series of broader perspectives on the seven core teachings of Jesus from the Sacred Partnership book. And today we're looking at number 4. This is actually one I recorded previously, but the video had a little glitches in it. So I'm going to re-record, and I'm just starting fresh because I don't have my notes anymore. And rather than, trying to watch the whole video and repeat everything, I thought I would do it fresh, and feels appropriate for the time that we are in. I know it's been a while since I have done one, but just needed to wait until I was in a good space in terms of the energy, and it's here today, so I'm going with it. So the 4th question that I asked when I wrote the book Sacred Partnership, the 7 pillars for the radical redefinition of relationship, which are based on these 7 core teachings of Yeshua that he gave me, and the question for the 4th teaching that he gave, the questions I was asking were like, okay, then what are the hallmarks of living in harmony with others and with one other, but just broadly speaking? And then what is it that we want to bring into a sacred partnership? Because at the time I asked these questions back in 2016, I was very focused on what I understood at the time to be the end goal, if you would, but my perspective on that has shifted a bit. And then the 3rd question that I asked was, which qualities of being will express the highest and purest expression of divine love within the context of human relationship? So those were the questions that I came to the table with. And I'm going to put my glasses on. So in the intro, before he gave me the core teaching, Jesus was talking a lot about that we're always, in every aspect of our lives and in every relationship with any other and with collective groups and or the larger collective of humanity, or even our relationship with our cosmic nature and our relationship to all that is, whether you consider that in terms of God, source, or whether you can consider that in terms of the elemental kingdom, nature, and our grounding here, that we're always moving into a deeper, truer state of union, that all things are essentially about sacred union. And when I first asked these questions and received this was a big shift for me to really wrap my head around that. And now here, 4 years later, it's something that I see it everywhere now. I see it everywhere. And so before we even get into the core teaching, the first broader application here is that when we have eyes to see that all things ultimately are an invitation into the sacred nature of life and into a return to our natural state of union, despite outward appearances of things being irreconcilable and being opposites. When we begin to make that shift and understand that this is always the invitation that is there for us in any circumstance, and what more perfect opportunity to look at that than here on Tuesday, November 3rd at 1:01 p.m. It's election day in the United States, and we all know this is a highly charged atmosphere that we're in, where there are plenty of examples of that polarity politically. Also, all of the usual ways that those polarities show up: socioeconomic, gender, and expressions and viewpoints in terms of so many different things. And all of it is an invitation to return to the sacred nature of life and to the true natural state of union. So from the introduction to this the core teaching, I want to touch on a few of the ideas that are in the book. If you want to go deeper, get my book Sacred Partnership, and because it really does apply to much more than just that traditional way of understanding what that is. So in this introduction, Jesus lays like the foundation here by talking about, like, it's when we come to any situation or to one another with intentionality and an open heart, with those two things, openness, intentionality, that is what allows for the conditions or the capacity for that deeper, truer union to emerge. And he was showing me this in terms of, it is an emergence. It's not a step by step by step, let's get to it in a 1, 2, 3 fashion. It is rather that we through our heart, the gateway of the heart, and through our choice to live with intentionality, those two things are what create the conditions for us to access what was my initial question about living in true harmony. And so what my understanding of what Jesus shared was that it is this ability to allow for the emergence of the true deeper state of union in a way that we don't necessarily go deep enough with that concept of sacred union, because he was showing me very clearly that it is not about agreement at all. It's not even about, it's certainly not about contractual, getting everybody on the same page or everybody on board with a particular agenda or particular even direction. Rather, it is life itself and the allowance for that life to emerge. And so in terms of individually and any experience of this state of harmony and sacred union can only be achieved when we are coming with an open heart and intentionality. And it's also a day-by-day practice in the moment. And the fruits of this approach become apparent in the lives of the individuals who have chosen to live with intentionality and with an open heart. I'm going to read little bits here. There's a sentence here that says, "You will feel more at peace, more in love, more in sync with the whole creation. Others will experience the natural healing nature your sacred union within you brings to the world." And then there are some indicators that Jesus gave me before he went into the core teaching of, how will you know, right, that you're living in harmony and that you're kind of doing your part, is the way I asked the question. And he described that the individual would experience a state of infinite freedom, which would then naturally present itself in any relationship in a very effortless way. And there would be the shared experience of simplicity where this is present. So when individuals, so let's just say you and me, when we open our heart and live with intentionality and bring that to every experience, then there is naturally created a shared experience of simplicity. And from that point of singularity and simplicity within a relationship dynamic, regardless of how many people are involved, right? Like if it's two individuals, if it's you and a group of people, if it's all of humanity, that when there is that coming together with an open heart and intentionality to allow for the sacredness of life, to allow for union to be revealed naturally without effort, then there is a simplicity, and from that simplicity it is possible, he was showing me, to explore many decisions and directions without attachment. And with just, again, I'm drawn to that image of water and how it can create new pathways. I used to, many years ago, I for 6 months or so, I did a little magazine called Pathways to Purpose. And this is what I remember being after, in terms of articulating this, that the pathways to purpose can be fluid and they are ever emerging in our presence. So Jesus was also sharing that when two individuals are both living from this state of freedom, right, and they've come together, that harmony is made possible. And the harmony itself, harmonious does not mean same, he was showing me, but the harmony that is allowed for, because we're allowing for the sacred nature of all things and the union and unity of all things within this vast diversity and diversified field, that because of that, that harmony will arise, and that the fulfillment of unity between sacred partners is linked to the holy honoring, HOLY honoring, of holy, WHOLLY, distinct gifts. And this is true as we experience it in day-to-day life. So as we open our hearts and live with intentionality and honor the holy, distinct gifts in the other, in one another, an honoring of that, even when we do not understand, because we can set aside the need to have understanding, and rather approach all of life and all of humanity as sacred, as beautiful, as purposeful. And in this, there is a flourishing that occurs in nature. You can see this, the wild things grow so beautifully, and it's a self-correcting natural system, and there is a harmonious blend, and where each participant, each flower, each weed, each seed, each branch and leaf that's fallen from the tree, everything has its purpose and contribution, and there is just this natural honoring. And I think that's one reason I love nature so much. I feel that, and this is what he was speaking to, that we will feel this. It's a resonance, but not a cause-effect resonance, but a natural, again, that honoring. That honoring is everything. And the things that we normally associate with harmony, in terms of, we might think of that as peace. We're all in one accord. We're on the same page. Those things are possible, but in a different way, because we water them down. We minimize them. There's a word I'm trying to get there. But we make them less than what they could be. And so the open heart and allowing the streams to flow through is really critical. And he also makes a point that this living in one accord is not at all about compromise, and neither is it a reduction that feels like sacrifice. That those two are the furthest things possible from this true state of harmonic resonance. And he says it does not require a laying aside of our individual soul gifts and human personalities. Rather, it is a beautiful blending that can only occur when the two or larger wholly love themselves, their partners, and the life that gives them life. This is the mystery of love, and it must be welcomed, not forced. So again, there's this flow, there's this allowing. It's 111 here. And that flow and that emerging of this beautiful experience of harmony is just like a flower opening up. It naturally blossoms when the time is right and when there are those conditions, because there is that sacred acknowledgement, that honoring, and the allowing for the true union to emerge from what seems to be divided. it strikes me that this is very interesting that I'm recording this again today, because this is always the higher experience that can be achieved. So the third indicator of this living in harmony that Jesus points out is trust, and that trust being let's see the sentence here: is there an implicit trust that supersedes any need to direct life, to control its flow, or to achieve a particular outcome? These are questions we can ask ourselves. Are we moving to life's changing rhythms without being tossed on the waves? Do we maintain our own voice, our unique gifts, without succumbing to or lessening ourselves or sacrificing? Do we first see, before all other things, this banner of love that unites us, in which we are all held? And do we start there, or is that an afterthought? Because these are clues to whether we are cultivating the conditions that will allow for the experience of sacred union and the harmony that we all want to experience. So the fourth teaching is actually about mirroring and accelerated soul growth. And this idea of things being reflected back to us that show us generally the thing that, or what we see first anyway, is the thing we think we don't want, and that we would reject or label or condemn or judge or say, no way, that person is this group is that. It's basically pointing the finger and blame that we most often resort to. And yet this very mirror, and we've got a big, few in our world at the moment, and this very mirror is an opportunity to return to our whole selves and our soul selves, to cultivate again that openness and that intentionality, where we step into our sovereign responsibility and tap those three abilities that I talked about in another video, which are so crucial in this time of transition. Let's see if I can remember them. It was responsibility, the ability to respond; relatability, the ability to relate; and adaptability, the ability to adapt. And so the mirror, or the opposite, or the thing that we think is so unacceptable, is actually invitation, always. It's an invitation to expand radiantly from within. It's an invitation to ask, where could I perhaps broaden my honoring and my recognition of life as sacred in this moment? How could I see that this person or this situation or this state that is not a desired state that I want to be a part of, how could I see this through the eyes of love? And how could I step back and look at it a different way and see the natural state of union that does exist and hold that vision? And how could I allow for the sacredness? Now, it's very easy in some cases to see what is profane and what is absolutely appearing to be not sacred, to be devoid of what is sacred. And yet this is merely invitation to reclaim, to the radical reclamation of those things which are sacred, but to do so in a way that is not reactive, but that is a reflection of our sovereign responsibility, that is a reflection of demonstrative of our ability to adapt, not surrender or abdicate our self-responsibility, and also not cave in, and also not control, but rather to live with the trust in life, and with the trust in God, source, and the larger sacredness, the sacred union that is our natural state. One of the, in the intro to this teaching, one of the things that Jesus said is that in sacred partnerships and in any state where sacred union is what we want to cultivate, rejection of the others, the rejection of the other is no longer an option. For to do so is to cut off our own path to life. And this is what, I think many of us have struggled with historically, and humanity as a whole. It's a real difficult lesson because we don't see how that is the case, and we often go to war against the oppositional force or whatever it might be, in an effort to reclaim our path to life, not realizing often that to outright reject a human anyway, and or something natural, is not in service to the sacredness of life and to what it is our hearts so desire to experience. So, there are basically two paths that we can choose. We can choose to embrace who we are at a soul level and to, attempt to live by making choices that are aligned with what our soul's truth and knowing is, or we can, sort of default to this kind of surface level avoidance of what's, pricking at our unhealed wound, and choose not to acknowledge our own soul's truth and radiance. And therefore, we resort to sort of fault finding and to deflection and condemnation. And we are called to be ministers of reconciliation. Now, this does not mean that, each of us is, intended to reconcile vastly divergent views of the world. But it is meaning that responsibility is critical. And when we open our hearts and live with intentionality to the best of our ability, and sometimes it's difficult to know, what choice to make in any given moment, because these are complex, there are complexities at play. And sometimes everything becomes a mirror, right? And there's no there are still choices to be made within that. And all of it, again, is an invitation to more and more and more live from that natural state of sacred union, to give our attention to that which is being brought to our attention from within us, because whatever's being triggered in us is where the real healing needs to occur, not out there. There are things certainly in the world that need to be addressed, and this is important. And we could have a conversation about, in the case of government and politics, we could have a conversation about civic responsibility or whatever else. But here we're talking about the state of union ultimately between ourselves as human beings with God, creator, source, life, and with other human beings, whether that be individuals or groups. And so we're not just, I think that's often a fallback position that we resort to, where there's just sort of this very surface level way of looking at things. And let me read that sentence again. In a state of sacred union, such rejection of the other is no longer an option, for to do so is to cut off our own path to life. Neither is it acceptable to default to a surface level avoidance of what is clearly pricking some unhealed wound or touching a deeper soul desire. So this is where this broader application comes in, because when we find ourselves triggered by something externally or in a relationship or with a particular circumstance in our life, and I think all of us have had something in 2020, maybe many somethings that have done that, then the question is, what is this inviting me to take a look at within my heart? Where, what's maybe hurting in here? And where can I bring my attention to my own heart so that I can keep it open? Remember, one of those conditions. Where can I be intentional about whatever's coming up for me? Where can I make a positive choice that is not reactionary, but is sourced from my ability to respond, is sourced from my ability to adapt, is sourced from my ability to relate? When I look at things in that way, through that threefold options there, then whatever choice I make is going to likely be one that does honor the sacred nature of all things and the union as above and beyond any seeming division, no matter how large that may seem and how high the stakes are, and they are high, and yet there's something deeper than that. And so two questions we can ask. One, unhealed wound, with what's being triggered. The second would be, what is the deeper desire here that I have? So, it might be, wow, this really is illuminating for me that I don't want to live in a world where this is happening. And often that's our first connection point. But then you have to go deeper, because then you have to say, okay, so what is it about the fact that this is happening? How do I feel? And usually there is a historical reference point in terms of an experience, a life experience you might have had. So how could I go back to that and, maybe look at the ways that I self-abandoned in a particular situation as a child or in a particular experience of life, and how can I make a different choice and a deep one that's more aligned with my deeper soul's truth and radiance in this moment, and how can I bring forth that desire for life? Because ultimately that's what's being called forth, is our desire to come to life, to live in full expression, to have life and have it to the full, to experience not a fake ideal of life, at least I hope most of us don't want that, but to truly, deeply experience life as sacred union, as beautiful, as an expression of what is good and holy, what is most pure and innocent and true and full of wonder. What is it that I can do to connect to that desire that I have and take an action, and while a part of that may be a response, not reaction, but a response to what outer conditions are presenting, there's something deeper that can happen here. And what Jesus was showing me and the team as he was talking was, and I don't think this is actually in the book, but I want to share it here, was that this the realignment, the reconfiguration, the transfiguration actually occurs when we step up to the plate and realize this is not about whatever's being presented, that it may be one factor of what's happening, but there is something much, much deeper, a much deeper opportunity that is at play here. So that growth and transformation they're inevitable, is what Jesus was showing me. If we keep our hearts open and live with intentionality, then we will naturally pay attention to the unhealed places, and it takes time, and then the deeper soul desires, the desire for life and life to the full. So the reflection, the mirror, wherever it may be appearing, whether that's in a one-to-one relationship or in a community or in a nation or the world, or whatever, in a story that you're watching on TV or reading in a book, it can be anything, literally, and that is always an opportunity to see more clearly. Where is it that I can open my heart to a greater state of union, and not just from from the aspect of understanding that on a mental plane, on a mental level, but from actually experiencing it fully. So that requires that we connect emotionally to our hearts, and it requires that we move toward a state of allowing for the expressions that are different than what our expression is, and seeing that too as sacred. So the next part of Jesus's teaching here was all about it was a deeper invitation to look in the mirror and to see that that gift of whatever is undesirable as a reflection that leads us into deeper self-awareness and knowing and remembering what we know and remembering our connection to all things, and that and seeing that as a sacred gift. So he said, where we would resort to egoic judgments and douse others or ourselves in shame, instead of facing who we are, there is instead the opportunity to see clearly like never before. And he goes into a deep discussion in the book about what often happens is we come so close, and it's the intensity is so much that one partner in one-to-one relationships often will opt out, withdraw. And so, of course, then there are wounds triggered on both sides, and then, the seeming divide becomes greater, greater, greater. And where does our focus go? To the gap, to the divide, to what's missing, to what we think we don't have. And so one of the things that I really inferred from his teachings on the path of the initiate in this particular chapter in the book was that we need to see ourselves as vessels for this treasure, and these bodies for our souls are what's the true treasure here, and to see that in the other and honor that, but also to kind of step back and to see the larger connections and to allow the space, because what happens is we rush in to fix things, and while there is a need to look at what's when we are triggered, whether by somebody we're living with or somebody on the public in the public arena, or a day-to-day situation that occurs, that while it is an invitation to look at what is being brought to the surface within us, and that is important, there is also this invitation to not give that moment in time, we're riveted by problems, and we rush into to fix and to solve and to get into action as if we must be perfect, and to allow for I think the invitation here is to allow for a little bit of space for grace. It was one of the sea doodles, soul essence art doodles I did that is the first one I think for Sacred Partnership series. And so this definitely applies in one-to-one relationships. But the broader application here is that the space is important. The spaciousness is important. We are in such a hurry to solve things. And usually our definition of what will solve things is that the opposite, that it be taken care of. And really, what is that but a win-lose proposition? I mean, I don't know a different situation in terms of electing a president or anything like that, but I do see that there is it's like we put all of our attention on this one thing, trying to make it different, to essentially have our way, so that whatever is it's almost like so that we can then believe that it's okay, now it's all right. Whew, now I don't have to worry because everything's being taken care of. Well, that too is an illusion, number one, but it also is a forfeiture of our sacred, sovereign nature. And it is a dishonoring, in the way I see it anyway, and you may see it differently. Not, holding space for that as well. But the way that I see that, that is a dishonoring of our true nature, of our natural state of union. It's a rather than it's a subtraction or a division of, it's an internal division of who we are. It's just like a fragmentation. And so rather, if we can see it all as, sort of this fractal experience of all being held in the whole, and so it's ever changing, but it's all, there's not any one perfect arrangement and then everything's fixed. And I feel like often that's how we tend to look at things, myself included. So there's again, this honoring is the word that jumps out at me. There is everything, in all things, in all circumstances, there is an opportunity to live from honoring and appreciation. Personal example. So, and I relate to this to something in your life. I'm not going to talk about specifics, but there are actually several, I can think of in my own life. In some personal relationships where certain things crop up again and again, and others more, day-to-day kind of life things. And when something continually is, it feels like, thrown up in your face, there is a constant, say, rejection or abandonment, or a constant belittling, say, from some person, or in a situation, say a work environment, or in a particular relationship, or just an absolute this pretense that you don't exist or something, and not talking about any one person here, but when that experience happens, even then there is the opportunity for us to see that and to still choose a path of honoring of the life in the other, of the sacred union in which you and that person who maybe denies your existence or otherwise devalues you. There's an opportunity still to hold that in a larger sacred container, while also choosing right action for your own path with regard to that individual if necessary, or when you're led to, but also just in terms of the full, the radical reclamation of who you are, the radiant realization of who you are, not dependent on that external factor, because it's a mirror that is inviting you. Where am I rejecting myself? Where am I abandoning myself? Where have I treated myself in such a way? Let's correct that. And so in the correcting of that, though, again, there's not this, when we are living in harmony, and when we are embodying those conditions of open-heartedness and intentionality that allow for the conditions of harmony, and when we are seeing through new eyes and embracing that whole new way of seeing the world around us and one another, a whole new way of being with one another, and a whole new way of freeing ourselves and the whole of humanity, when we're allowing for that, when we're creating that space for grace, even if the actual situation does not change from what's actually happening, whether you're confronted with that on a day-to-day basis, like in a workplace environment, for example, or if it's this one thing, even if nothing changes externally, even for in the political landscape, if we have 4 more years of what we supposedly don't want, or if we have some hodgepodge solution that's not what we felt or desired, regardless, still, if there exists within us the choice for that higher octave experience that is fueled by honoring of ourselves and honoring of the sacred in the others, the sacred nature of who we are and the sacred nature of who the other is, regardless of their externalized actions and choices, that deep commitment to honoring of the self and the other, all of life, another person, another group, whatever that is, that and the spaciousness that's created for the work of what I would call God's Spirit, or the calling forth of life, the life force, the life breath itself. When those things happen and there is this deep commitment to honoring, then there is something that happens that is a shift inside that naturally elevates all things. And ultimately, in nature, you can see this, ultimately, the system itself is naturally corrected and realigned, and all things are risen to their higher, truer, deeper state, and ultimately exist within that sacred union, even if one of the players in that larger picture of sacred union is pretending not to be a part of that, or is still acting out in terms of reflecting back, or in terms of let me correct that, in terms of choosing a certain set of patterns or behaviors that are dishonoring. It's still the system itself, or the natural state of things, can still exist. And this, in many ways, is what I think Jesus meant when he taught us about the kingdom of God. And I like the word realm, and the realm of God, and the fact that this is accessible to us in any moment. He didn't say after we get everything corrected. Now, he was quite vocal, right, about the political systems of the day, at least as it pertained to those within the religious structures of the day, and to some degree also the his stance was quite different, but in terms of like Rome and Caesar, and the powers that be of that time. And yet all of that notwithstanding, look at what his teachings show us, even from the biblical record. If you look at what he taught in the Sermon on the Mount, for example, it was to return to the kingdom of God, within, and to give us this day our daily bread, to the simplicity of the Lord's Prayer, to ask for forgiveness and to forgive others, and to live with integrity, true integrity. If you read the Sermon on the Mount, it goes a little deeper than don't hurt anybody. And so all of this is to say that because it doesn't matter what happens or what the other person does, because you, and as an individual, and we as humanity, will be naturally elevating the entire state of union that is the true state of existence. And ultimately, all the rest will fall away. All that chooses to be in defiance of that, to deny life, essentially, or all who are working against that will have no impact ultimately, because there's that invisible power. There's a verse I'm trying to get to, and I can't quite get it right now, but it'll come later if necessary. But that we're able to tap into something truly life-changing, world-changing, and it is this true transformative power that is why I believe Jesus came, to show us how to live. And this happens in the moment. It happens in real life circumstances that are challenging. So it's all easier said than done, of course, to honor and appreciate in situations that are perhaps appear to be dishonoring of, and maybe are dishonoring of, us individually, or of other portions of humanity. That can be the most difficult when we see that, whether it is actually truly happening, or whether it is an illusion of what's being created. Either way, it can be super difficult to hold that and to remain in that state of seeing things in that way. It's a very difficult, precarious thing to hold that, and yet it can be it can be done through openness, through open-heartedness, and through intentionality. So honor and appreciation are really critical. So again, back to the broader application, let me read this one sentence. Easier said than done, of course, yet there is no question that this is the way of life. And it is a way where all is restored and where we too are fully restored to our original state of belonging to one another. As we bring the focus of our attention back to our own soul's growth and seek to see and know ourselves more clearly within the state of sacred union that exists in all things, we choose the road less traveled and discover that it is one that leads us to untold treasures. And so Jesus talked a lot about this being the path of the initiate, and that, both in terms of the specifics of sacred partnership, and then this larger, broader application being that it's no easy task for us to live in such a way, because the sheer reality of modern day life here in whatever century we're in this place and time, but all of it can be an opportunity to grow back toward the ground of God, to return to our whole selves and our soul selves. And our responsibility in all of life, where we come up against this mirroring and these things that we wish were not there, whether it's like some huge issue, hunger, poverty, abuse, or whether it is, in the political arena, or whether it is in our family structure and, whatever's happening, whatever, drama or trauma is playing itself out there, or in one-to-one relationships, or even our relationship with ourselves, because this all is true within us too. It takes great courage to recognize the imbalances within us, and sometimes we need a little help getting there. And our responsibility in all of these situations, as it pertains to this gateway to the experience of life and life to the full, and the experience of a natural state of sacred union, and the experience of harmony, and all of that comes down to responsibility, the ability to respond within all of these circumstances. And we can assess that and then find the courage to respond, and then take that response. It's 1:44 p.m. We can do that by asking 3 questions. One is, how am I growing in this situation that I'm seeing and experiencing? And if you don't see a way you're growing, then to ask the next question, which is, how can I grow from this? What can I learn about myself and what I'm feeling, experiencing, thinking, how I'm behaving? Basically being aware. How can I be more aware of what's happening here? What choices am I making? Again, goes back to intentionality and open-heartedness. So the first question is, how am I growing in the situation that I'm seeing or experiencing? To choose a trajectory of growth. So that looks different in different circumstances and situations. And it takes a lot of courage sometimes to go against what is the cultural norm, particularly in collective situations. And what's presented to us, served up on a silver platter by whomever, you could say, media channels certainly, but also like just the larger culture, right? It's considered the norm, and so we often choose this path of reduction, and that's not how we're meant to live. That's not growth. So how am I growing in the situation that I'm seeing or experiencing? And then how will I choose to, and be creative about that? So that's the first question. The second question is, what am I being asked to learn through this experience that we are having? What is it here that I'm really learning about? The first obvious place is, what am I learning about my preferences, about the way I see the world, about the way others see the world, about others' preferences? What am I seeing here, and what am I learning about where I desire to have more input, control, a voice? Where am I speaking to what I believe? Where am I not speaking up? where am I allowing someone else's, and again, don't think of this just in terms of viewpoints. It can be literal, like behaviors. Like, where am I allowing, you know, a path of reduction in myself, in playing out in a relationship, or for that to play out in a way that I seemingly think, oh, it's not connected to me, not my problem, you know, I'm not causing that. What can I do? So where are you opting out, and where's the invitation to engage, to have more engagement, and to really have that dialogue within yourself, with another, in the larger collective? And what is the opportunity for you individually to learn, to transform, to grow, to change? The third question is, how will I choose to expand rather than contract with myself, with the other, and as I move through the world on a day-to-day basis? So this is one that I try to ask every day, regardless of, you know, how I'm feeling, even on my off days, you know, well, how am I going to choose a path of expansion and growth? Basically, it all comes back to that, doesn't it? Expansion and growth. So there are 4 learning opportunities Jesus talked about with regard to this mirroring as an opportunity for accelerated growth. The first is soul growth. The second is soul purpose. The third is soul mission. The fourth is soul mastery. I'm not going to go into detail. You can read the book if you want to know more about that. But each of these, growth, purpose, mission, and mastery, are ways that this experience of being triggered essentially by what is mirrored back to us is an opportunity to return to our soul's truth and knowing. And then there's also an opportunity for course correction when, in any situation in life, there are disruptive patterns, and either participants or multiple participants, groups, individuals, you know, families, relationships, workplace, any of it, when there is a fallback into preconditioned patterning, where there's basically a lapse in consciousness, or a state of unawareness, or a contraction, or a disregard, a dishonoring, any of that, then whenever it occurs, every party has an opportunity. It's a presentation of an opportunity to choose how we will respond. And some responses much is required from some responses if we are to choose to remain in integrity with our soul's truth and knowing, and to hold that state of sacred honoring for ourselves and for the other, and to continue to align ourselves with the knowing that sacred union is our true and natural state. So a lot's required. These choices are not necessarily simple ones. That's why, though, when many of us continually choose the lesser path, either shrugging our shoulders and, you know, thinking it's not our responsibility, or I can't change it, or other sorts of minimalizations of what's actually occurring, because what's actually occurring is a dishonoring. But again, there is a tendency for us to see it in the other and then rush to, like, straighten that person out, or to vote them out of office, or to see it as a very an aberration, when actually it's always, it may be an aberration, but it's always an opportunity to further refine, for refinement within ourselves, and again a return to seeing through the eyes of the soul, and living in alignment with our soul's truth and knowing, and choosing a path of honoring that is freeing for all in the situation, even when that doesn't, you know, play itself off as, or play itself out in terms of what seems to be harmony, you know, between all parties involved. So this recognition of when the patterns are beginning and when we're playing into them. So the first thing is to acknowledge when they're occurring, and then to shift our own choices in a way that is honoring of ourselves and the other. And this is why it's the path of the initiate. It's not simple sometimes to do that, and we just do the best that we can, but always with a connection to our hearts and souls. There's a sentence in here that says prefabricated patterns of behavior are not rooted in the way of wholeness and must be recognized within any relationship or system. Find the courage to return to a more organic approach. And then Jesus talks a lot about releasing preconceptions and the meaning of preconception and how that is a limitation, and that returning to the sacred nature of life and walking in the way of wholeness, because ultimately it's about wholeness and integration that begins within us, and then that is recognized or realized over time in the relationship dynamic and in communities, and ultimately in our global community, in the whole of humanity, and with all of creation. I have more to say on that. I'm going to save that for a different video though. And so all of this mirroring that is an opportunity for accelerated growth is actually it is the raising up of the one creation, the one light, the one life, the one love, and the more and more that each of us does this, the more radiance is created, and the less likely it is that people will be able to live in a way that is so out of alignment with their own integrity, their own soul's truth and knowing, and this sort of collusion that occurs in our culture and in families. It's a poison. It's a sickness. It's a sick society, and the way that is perpetuated is because we again we check out. Ultimately, we distract ourselves. Lots of different opportunities to do that are presented to us, of course, and it's easy to get caught up in some of those. But all of it is opportunity, and it's about walking in the way of wholeness and a return to that openness. It's essentially an open door, to open the door, and to see that there is a new way of meeting ourselves in every moment, and meeting one another, and seeing the whole of humanity and this amazing journey that we're making here. As each beloved in a relationship, or each beloved in a community, or each beloved in humanity dares to meet the undesirable thing as invitation into further wholeness and soul unification, the miracle of life unfolds. We grow our roots, we spread our wings. So meeting the undesirable thing, who among us really wants to do that? And yet I have found when I have dared to do it that it takes great courage, and it can sometimes feel like it's breaking you apart, and you're smashed to smithereens, and yet there is always a unification occurring that is a beautiful thing. And when you feel yourself beginning to have those roots that are where you're rooted in your own soul's truth and radiance, and then you begin to feel your wings, and you begin to experience what it is to be free, not free from all things, but to be set free in all things, to be the creation itself, to be set free and raised up. This is the gift. This is where all of that mirroring and all of that ugly stuff we didn't want to look at actually becomes the very path that leads us to pass through that open door and into a realm, the kingdom within, where all things become possible, where all things are in harmony and in alignment with our own soul's truth and radiance are drawn to us naturally, where the natural system of thriving exists without effort, without the need to, fix or control. This does not mean we don't care. It does not mean we are withdrawn from the larger context of our lives, from society, from culture, from whatever connection to that is in alignment and resonance for us. It doesn't mean that we just disregard all of that, but rather that the higher choice is always made that has to do with the sacred nature of life. So that is the broader application of this fourth core teaching, which was, I want to make sure I get the words correct. The fourth teaching was mirroring an accelerated soul growth. And the opportunity is to choose that path of growth. Now, this particular teaching, core teaching of the 7 pillars for the radical redefinition of relationship, which, and the broader application here being the radical redefinition of our experience of life as one that is reflected by the true natural state of sacred union that exists always. And this core teaching is associated with the fourth of the 7 wonders of the soul, which is healing. The 7 wonders of the soul are faith, hope, love, healing, growth, passion, beauty. And this one is associated with healing. It's pretty evident why. Because we have to be willing. We have to be willing to choose that path of healing and growth, and to acknowledge that what we see as needing to change externally is an invitation to tend to the care of our souls, to open up our hearts, and to meet ourselves and meet one another from a place of spaciousness, where there is an acknowledgement that we are, whatever our differences may be, however awful those may be in terms of like what's actually happening externally, however anti-life or anti-Christ we may see the other, or anti-anything, or however disruptive we may experience a particular situation in our lives, that there is always the ability to respond by connecting to that fourth of the 7 wonders, healing, and that is aligned with our heart center, and to return there, and to be gentle with ourselves and with one another, and to realize that we're all essentially on our own healing and growth journey. Even the most unconscious person that appears in our reality, and that has been on the big stage, so to speak, in many, many ways, not just one individual, but there are some obvious players there that have been mirroring that quite remarkably for us. And it is such a gift. It is such a gift. I don't think that many of us, necessarily see that to the full extent that it is true. But this time is like a time like no other in the history of humanity. In our individual and mutual alignment with the attributes of healing and growth, and with the honoring of one another, our realignment, our reconfiguration as a society, because we are in this passage to a new society where these 12 diamond dimensions are coming into play. You can see my free journeys on my website related to that, to access the videos there. If you have trouble, email me, because I'm changing some things up. But in any case, our realignment with that path of healing and growth as one people, one humanity, as a nation, as a community, in our families, as 2 individuals, in a partnership or in a relationship of whatever kind, a friendship, and within ourselves. That path of seeing the natural state of all as sacred union is one that is going to change our world like nothing else, because it is a return to our true heritage and to our soul's truth and knowing, and to the recognition that we are held in one light and one life and one love.